Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and, let's face it, increasingly vital area: how data protection rules in Europe apply to the rapidly evolving world of artificial intelligence.
That's right. Specifically, we're looking at Opinion 28/2024 from the European Data Protection Board. It really tackles the processing of personal data when you're talking about AI models.
So our mission today, for you listening, is what? What are we trying to get out of this?
Good question. We want to really pull out the core data protection things to think about, around building and using AI in the EU, all based on what the EDPB has really spelled out in this opinion.
Think of it as your shortcut, yeah.
Exactly, your shortcut to understanding the crucial data privacy side of AI.
And just to be clear, this isn't just us, like, thinking out loud. This deep dive is grounded in an official opinion from the EDPB itself.
The top authority on this stuff in the EU. So yeah, straight from the source, but hopefully broken down for you.
Right. And it's important to remember the context, isn't it? AI has this huge potential, loads of benefits.
Oh, absolutely. Innovation everywhere.
Yeah.
But the GDPR, it's designed to kind of guide that innovation responsibly, make sure we protect fundamental rights, especially data protection, but also things like freedom of thought, expression, even business freedom.
It's about balancing innovation and responsibility.
Precisely. Innovation with responsibility. And this EDPB opinion, it steps right into that, addressing some very specific questions that just naturally come up with AI.
And these weren't just random questions they decided to answer.
No. They actually came from the Irish Supervisory Authority, the SA in Ireland.
Right.
They asked the EDPB for clarity on some key points.
Okay, so what are those key points? What are we going to cover?
So we'll be focusing on three main questions today. First, when can you really say an AI model is anonymous? Genuinely anonymous.
Okay.
Second, how can AI developers and the people using the AI show that their use of personal data is based on a legitimate interest? How do they prove that?
Right. That's a big one.
And finally, what happens if personal data gets processed unlawfully, like without the right basis during the AI development stage? What are the consequences?
Okay, let's get into that first one then. Anonymity.
Yeah, anonymity in AI. It sounds simple, doesn't it?
You'd think so. Train a model, the data gets crunched up, the model just makes predictions. Surely the personal stuff is gone.
Well, that's the common assumption. But the EDPB opinion, it definitely pours some cold water on that idea. They're quite skeptical.
So it's not automatic.
Not at all. The EDPB is very clear. Just because you trained an AI on personal data doesn't mean the model itself is anonymous. Not always. They really stress that any claim of anonymity needs a proper, detailed case-by-case check by the supervisory authorities, the SAs in each country.
Okay, so the essays have to dig in. What are they actually looking for? What makes a model anonymous in their eyes?
They've set out this crucial two-part test. For a model to be truly anonymous, the chance of two things happening needs to be insignificant. Really, really low.
Okay, what's the first?
First, the likelihood of directly extracting personal data that was used for training. And that includes probabilistic extraction, too.
Probabilistic, meaning even if you can't get the exact data, but you can strongly guess something about a person?
Exactly. If you can infer personal details with high confidence, that counts. Second part of the test.
Yeah.
The likelihood of getting that personal data from just querying the model. Asking it questions, giving it prompts, whether someone does it on purpose or just by accident, both need to be insignificantly likely.
An insignificant likelihood. It sounds a bit vague. How do they judge that?
It's definitely not casual. The assessment has to consider all the means reasonably likely to be used, and this is really key. Not just the means available to the AI developer or deployer.
Or anyone else, too.
But any other person, yeah. So you have to think broadly about who might try to get that data out and how.
So the essays are kind of like investigators, checking the evidence the companies provide. What sort of evidence or documentation are we talking about?
Well, the EDPB gives a list, though they say it's not exhaustive, things controllers might do and assayers will look for. During development, maybe things like how they tried to avoid collecting personal data in the first place or limit it.
Makes sense.
Techniques to make the data collected less identifiable. Measures specifically designed to stop data being extracted from the finished model and showing that the model can resist known state-of-the-art attacks.
It's interesting they mentioned data being absorbed into the parameters, even if the model isn't meant to spit out names or addresses directly. Like a ghost in the machine, you said.
Yeah, it's a decent analogy. Those mathematical weights in the model, they learn patterns from the data. And sometimes those patterns can implicitly hold onto or allow the reconstruction of the original personal information. It's like a faint echo of the data.
Hmm.
And the research in this area, as the EDPB notes, it's constantly finding new ways this can happen, new vulnerabilities. Even when AI is being used through APIs or prompts, personal data processing might occur unexpectedly.
And this whole field is moving so fast, right? The attack methods, the defense method.
Exactly. It's incredibly dynamic. The EDPB points to ongoing research showing these risks. That's why they stress this needs continuous evaluation. They even refer back to an older opinion from WP29, the EDPB's predecessor on anonymization.
Reminding us of the classic risks.
Yeah, like singling someone out, linking different pieces of information together, or inferring new personal details. Those risks still apply, maybe even more so with complex AI.
Okay, so when an SA is looking at all the means reasonably likely to be used, what factors do they weigh up?
They look at Recital 26 of the GDPR for guidance, and the EDPB echoes this. Things like, what kind of training data was it? What's the model like? How was it trained?
A context, too.
Absolutely. How is the model being released or used? What other information might be out there that someone could combine with the model's output? How much would it cost, or how long would it take for someone to get that extra info?
And technology changes.
Right. Current tech, future tech, that all plays a part in judging what's reasonably likely.
And it's not just about hackers, is it? You mentioned other persons, including maybe accidental disclosures.
Precisely. It covers the whole spectrum. Intentional attacks, unintentional leaks, misuse by third parties. It's about the overall risk environment.
Okay, so to quickly recap the EDPB's conclusion on anonymity.
Basically, for an AI model to count as anonymous, the chance of getting any personal data out, either directly or via queries, has to be insignificant for any data subject using any method someone might reasonably try.
That sounds like a really high bar.
It is. And the default position for AS should be: assume the model needs a very careful check. Don't just take the controller's word for it.
And the EDPB gives some pointers for what SEs might look at during that check.
Yeah, they list some elements, again, not exhaustive, not prescriptive, but things as might consider. They group them into a few areas.
Okay, like what? Let's start with the AI model's design.
Right at the start. Did they choose appropriate data sources? Did they filter out risky ones? How did they handle data preparation? Did they try to minimize personal data from the get-go?
Did they consider using anonymous or pseudonymized data?
Exactly. And if they didn't, why not? What minimization strategies did they actually use? Filters, things like that.
So getting the input right is step one. What about the actual training methods?
Yeah, how the model was built. Did they use techniques like regularization to prevent the model just memorizing the training data?
That can happen.
Oh, yes, especially with very large models. And crucially, did they use any privacy-preserving techniques like differential privacy? How well was it implemented?
Differential privacy.
Yeah.
That's a specific mathematical technique, right?
It is, yeah. Adds controlled noise to make individual records harder to identify. And finally, under design, any built-in measures to limit personal data appearing in the model's output, even if it's already absorbed the data during training.
Okay, so design is one area. Then there's analyzing the model after it's built.
Right. SAS will want to see proof of audits, internal ones, maybe external ones too, audits that check if the chosen anonymization measures actually work.
Like code reviews.
Code reviews, theoretical analysis, showing how resistant the model should be to re-identification. Documented proof.
And testing, given how attacks evolve.
Huge part of it. AS will look at the testing regime. How often, how thorough, what kinds of tests? Were they testing against the latest known attacks? Things like attribute inference, trying to guess sensitive attributes, membership inference, figuring out if someone's data was in the training set, exfiltration, regurgitation, trying to make the model spit out training data, model inversion, reconstruction attacks.
Wow, okay. Lots of potential attack vectors.
There are. And showing you've tested against them provides evidence of robustness. Not a perfect guarantee, but important evidence.
And lastly, documentation. Always documentation with GDPR.
Always. The EDPB really hammers this home. Good documentation is essential for accountability. They reference several GDPR articles 5, 24, 25, 30, 35 for DPIAs.
DPIA is the Data Protection Impact Assessments.
Correct. So controllers need records of the processing, even if the aim is anonymization. As want to see the DPIAs, any advice from the DPO, details of the technical and organizational measures taken.
Threat models. risk assessment.
All of that. Plus, documentation on the model's theoretical resistance, the testing reports, metrics used to measure re-identification risk, and even what information was given to people deploying the model or to data subjects about the anonymization process.
And if the documentation isn't there or isn't good enough?
Well, the EDPB says failure to demonstrate effective anonymization through proper documents could itself be seen as a breach of the accountability principle. Article 5.2.
Basically, you have to prove you did it right.
You have to be able to show you complied. If you can't, you're accountable. Okay, shall we move on to the second big question, legitimate interest?
Yeah, let's do it. So legitimate interest as a legal basis for processing personal data in AI. The GDPR has other bases, like consent, but this opinion dives into legitimate interest.
Right, and they start by saying, look, there's no ranking of legal bases. Consent isn't automatically better. It's about choosing the right one for the specific situation.
But using legitimate interest isn't just a free pass.
Definitely not. The EDPB really underlines that you need a careful, documented justification if you want to rely on it. And they flag other GDPR principles that are super relevant here, too.
Beyond just having a lawful basis under Article 6.
Yeah. Accountability, obviously, Article 5.2. We just talked about that. Fairness and transparency, Article 5.1a, Articles 12.14. That includes being clear about the logic in automated decisions, for example.
And purpose limitation, data minimization.
Crucial. Article 5.1b and c. Only process what's necessary for the specific purpose. Even if you argue you need data to reduce bias, it still has to be necessary. And data subject rights under Chapter 3 are key, especially...
Yeah, right to object.
Exactly. Article 21, if you use a legitimate interest, people generally have the right to object, and you might have to start processing their data.
Okay, so if a company wants to use legitimate interest for their AI, what's the process? What steps do they need to take?
It's the standard three-step test for legitimate interest, which the EDPB lays out again clearly.
Step 1.
Identify the interest. Is there a legitimate interest being pursued, either by the controller or maybe a third party?
Okay. Step 2.
Necessity. Is the processing of personal data actually necessary to achieve that interest?
And step 3.
The balancing test. You have to weigh the controller's or third party's interest against the interests, rights, and freedoms of the data subjects. Does your interest override their rights?
And this isn't just ticking boxes, you said.
No, absolutely not. It requires a real documented assessment, weighing the pros and cons, the potential harms versus the benefits, always with a default towards protecting the individual.
Okay, let's break down step 1. Identifying a legitimate interest. What counts as an interest?
It's pretty broad. A stake, a benefit the controller wants to achieve. The EDPB says you have to look at legitimacy case by case, but gives 3 conditions it must meet.
Which are...
It has to be lawful, obviously. It needs to be clearly articulated. You can't be vague. And it has to be real and present, not just some hypothetical future interest.
Can you give some AI-related examples?
Sure. Like maybe developing a chat bot to improve customer service. That could be a legitimate interest for the developer. Or when using AI, maybe deploying a system to detect fraud or security threats. Those seem potentially legitimate.
Okay, that seems clear enough. Step 2, necessity. This sounds like proving you really need the personal data.
That's exactly it. Recital 39 of GDPR is key only. Process personal data if the purpose can't reasonably be achieved some other way that's less intrusive.
Less intrusive.
Yeah. The courts and the EDPB consistently say you have to look at this through the lens of fundamental rights and data minimization.
So just because using personal data is easier or cheaper isn't enough?
Not necessarily. The EDPB breaks necessity down. First, will processing the data actually help achieve the purpose? Second, is there a way to do it that intrudes less on privacy?
Like using less data, or maybe data that isn't personal at all.
Precisely. They explicitly say controllers need to consider the volume of personal data planned versus less intrusive options, maybe even models that don't use personal data. Using first-party data versus third-party data might also be relevant here.
Interesting.
And they also note that putting strong technical safeguards in place, even if they don't make the data fully anonymous, can actually help meet the necessity test. It reduces the intrusiveness.
Right, makes sense. Okay, now the big one. Step 3, the balancing test. Weighing the interests. How does that work?
This is where you identify the competing interests and rights and put them on the scales. On one side, the data subject's interests, rights, and freedoms. On the other, the controller's or third party's legitimate interest.
What kinds of things are on the data subject side of the scale?
Well, during development, it's about things like self-determination, controlling your own data. When the AI is deployed, it's still that, but also maybe financial interests, personal benefits, socioeconomic factors like accessing
Then
services.
fundamental rights.
Yes, the EDPB points to the EU Charter. Rights like privacy, obviously. Freedom of expression, maybe, if AI filters content. Non-discrimination, huge issue with AI bias. Even mental and physical health or safety.
But AI could also help protect some rights.
It could. They acknowledge that, like AI identifying harmful content online or improving access to healthcare. So it's a complex balance.
What else goes into this balancing act, besides the rights themselves?
The EDPB talks about the impact of the processing. What kind of data is it? Really sensitive stuff. How is it being processed? The context, security measures. What are the potential consequences down the line?
So assessing the risk.
Assessing the severity and the likelihood of risks. And thinking about different groups, people in the training data versus people interacting with the deployed model. And importantly, the potential for the AI itself to be misused.
Like deepfakes or spreading disinformation.
Exactly. That potential for misuse has to be factored into the balance.
That's a heavy list. What about reasonable expectations? That often comes up in privacy.
Crucial factor, says the EDPB, especially with AI being so complex. Just telling someone you're using their data doesn't automatically mean they'd reasonably expect it to be used in a specific AI context.
So what influences expectations?
Lots of things. For development data, was the data already public? What's the person's relationship with the controller? Where did the data come from? Privacy settings? Did people know data scraped online might be used for AI training? For deployment? Are people aware data they provide for one service might be used to train a general model? Is there a direct link with the controller?
Okay. So after weighing all this, the interests, the rights, the impact, the expectations, what if it looks like the data subject side outweighs the controller's interest? Is legitimate interest off the table?
Not always. This is where mitigating measures come in.
Mm-hmm.
The EDPB says controllers can implement extra safeguards, things that go beyond the standard GDPR requirements.
Additional protections.
Exactly. If these extra measures effectively reduce the negative impact on data subjects, it might tip the balance back, allowing the controller to rely on legitimate interest after all.
Okay, examples. What kind of mitigating measures for the AI development phase?
Could be technical things, maybe pseudonymization, though they add caveats. Masking data, substituting parts of it. Measures we discussed under anonymity that maybe didn't quite reach full anonymization but still help.
And non-technical.
Facilitating rights more strongly, like offering an unconditional opt-out, even if not strictly required. Broader rights to get data deleted. Being more transparent than Articles 13 and 14 demand detailed collection info, maybe FAQs, videos, transparency labels. For web scraping, things like respecting robots.txt, avoiding risky sites, maybe time limits, offering an opt-out list.
And mitigating measures during the deployment phase when the AI is being used.
Again, technical measures are key. Filters to stop the model outputting personal data, preventing regurgitation, digital watermarking maybe to track misuse, and facilitating rights beyond the basics, like easier ways to get outputs deleted or corrected, maybe using techniques to suppress personal data even after training. The EDPB even suggests controllers could publish their balancing test assessment for transparency, and they stress involving the DPO throughout is a good mitigating factor itself.
Right. Okay, that covers legitimate interest. Let's hit the final question. What happens if the development was unlawful?
Yes, the consequences of getting it wrong at the start. Question 4 from the Irish essay. If personal data was processed unlawfully during development specifically, meaning without a proper legal basis under Article 5(1)(a) and Article 6, what then?
And just to clarify, this is about the lack of a legal basis initially.
Primarily, yes. Though the opinion notes that unlawful development could also lead to other breaches, like transparency failures or not doing data protection by design. But the focus here is the impact of that initial unlawful processing. Accountability is key. Again, the controller has to ensure and demonstrate compliance. Figuring out who the controller is, any joint controllers, is step 1.
So if an SA finds this unlawful processing happened during development, what can they do?
They have significant corrective powers under Article 58. Fines, obviously, but also potentially ordering the controller to stop processing temporarily or permanently. They can order the erasure of the unlawfully processed data, the data sets, even the resulting AI model itself.
Order erasure of the model. Wow.
Potentially, yes. Or maybe order it to be retrained using lawfully obtained data. And remember, data subjects can also request erasure under Article 17, and uses can order it themselves. These GDPR powers are separate from anything authorities might do under, say, the new AI Act or civil law.
Okay. The EDPB then looks at 3 specific scenarios.
Yeah.
Scenario 1, unlawful development, the bad data is still in the model, and the same company that developed it keeps using it, maybe for deployment.
In that case, whatever the essay does about the initial unlawful processing, like ordering erasure, will directly affect the later processing. Whether development and deployment are seen as separate purposes and how the initial unlawfulness taints the later stages needs a case-by-case look. If they try to use legitimate interest for deployment, that initial unlawful processing definitely weighs negatively in the balancing test. The risks are higher, the processing is less expected.
Makes sense. Scenario 2, unlawful development, data still in the model, but now a different company gets the model and uses it, like buying an AI model from a startup.
Right. Here, both the original developer and the new company deploying the model have GDPR responsibilities. The essay's powers over the first company still apply. They might still have to erase data or notify the new company if erasure happens. The key point is the new company, the deployer, has its own duty accountability to check if the model they got was developed lawfully.
How thoroughly do they need to check?
Depends on the risks of how they plan to use it. They should look into data sources, check if the original developer already got into trouble with SAs or courts. If this new company wants to use legitimate interest, again, the original sin of unlawful development has to be considered in their balancing test. It increases the risk profile.
Okay. Final scenario. Scenario 3. Unlawful development, but then the model gets properly anonymized. After that, either the same or a different company uses the anonymized model, maybe processing new personal data during deployment.
Okay, couple parts here. First, the essays can still take action regarding the initial unlawful development, and they can scrutinize the anonymization process itself. Was it done effectively according to the standards we discussed earlier?
Right.
Now, if the model operation after anonymization genuinely does not involve personal data anymore, and that needs to be proven, not just asserted, then the GDPR doesn't apply to that ongoing operation.
But what if they then use that anonymized model to process new personal data? Like maybe the model helps personalize a service using data the user provides now.
Okay. If new personal data is processed during deployment, using the previously anonymized model as a tool perhaps, then GDPR does apply to that new processing of the new data. But, importantly, the lawfulness of this new processing isn't automatically tainted by the unlawfulness of the original model development, because the link via personal data was broken by the anonymization.
So effective anonymization acts like a reset button for future processing of new data, even if the initial build was flawed.
In terms of the lawfulness carrying over, yes, that seems to be the logic here, assuming the anonymization was genuine and effective.
Got it. So wrapping up, this EDPB opinion really gives some vital pointers for anyone working with AI and personal data in the EU.
Absolutely. It highlights that anonymity isn't straightforward with AI, that legitimate interest needs a very robust justification, and that getting the legal basis wrong during development can have serious, lasting consequences. These 3 areas, anonymity, legitimate interest, unlawful processing, they're really intertwined.
Definitely some aha moments there for me, especially on just how tricky proving anonymity is and how detailed that legitimate interest balancing test needs to be.
It is complex, and if you, listening, are feeling a bit snowed under by all the detail, hopefully this conversation has given you the essential takeaways without needing to read the whole, quite dense opinion yourself.
Yeah, consider it a shortcut through the legalese.
Exactly. And it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? With AI evolving so fast and data protection techniques trying to keep up, how will these guidelines need to change in the future? How do we keep balancing innovation and rights effectively?
That's the big question. And maybe also, what's our role as individuals in understanding how our data is used in these systems?
Powerful thoughts to end on. If this deep dive sparked more questions for you, we definitely encourage you to explore the full EDPB opinion. Think about what it means for how you interact with AI and view data privacy.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.